December 11, 1978. JFK Airport, New York. 3 o'clock in the morning. 6 masked men with guns storm into the Lufthansa Airlines cargo terminal. 64 minutes later, they drive away with $6 million in cash and jewelry, the biggest cash robbery in American history at the time. Within 2 years, 11 people connected to the heist would be dead, shot in the head, stabbed, dismembered, frozen in meat trucks. The mastermind would die in prison. The getaway driver would vanish forever. And the insider who made it all possible would become the most famous informant in Mafia history, destroying an entire crime family with his testimony. This is the story of the perfect heist that became a bloodbath, and how greed, paranoia, and broken rules brought down the Lucchese crime family. Jimmy Burke wasn't Italian, so he could never be a made man in the Mafia. His father was Irish, but he was a criminal genius who worked for the Lucchese family, specifically for Capo Paul Vario at the Bamboo Lounge in Queens. Burke earned his nickname the Gent because he was always calm, always polite, always in control. He never raised his voice, never showed emotion. He wore nice suits, spoke softly, and treated people with respect. Unless you crossed him, then he'd kill you without hesitation. By 1978, Burke had been hijacking trucks at JFK Airport for decades. It was his territory, his specialty. Cargo came through that airport from all over the world: electronics, jewelry, designer clothes, cash. Burke had connections everywhere: truck drivers, cargo handlers, security guards. He ran a sophisticated operation that made him and the Lucchese family millions. But Burke had a problem. He was in deep with loan sharks. He owed money to the wrong people. He needed a big score, something that would clear his debts and set him up for life. That's when he heard about the Lufthansa shipments. Lufthansa Airlines was moving massive amounts of untraceable currency through JFK. The reason was simple: international banking regulations. American military personnel stationed in West Germany were paid in US dollars, but they needed German Deutschmarks to spend in the local economy, so they'd exchange their dollars on base. The German government would then ship those American dollars back to the United States via Lufthansa cargo flights to be redeposited in the banking system. Millions of dollars, every few weeks, untraceable cash that couldn't be tracked because it had already been exchanged multiple times through military and government channels. And it all sat overnight in a cargo vault at JFK Airport before being transported to banks in Manhattan the next morning. The vault was in Building 261, the Lufthansa cargo terminal. Relatively light security overnight. A handful of workers, minimal cameras. The Germans didn't think anyone would be crazy enough to rob an airport cargo facility. Burke knew about these shipments, but he needed inside information. He needed schedules, security details, vault locations, the exact procedures workers followed. That's where Louis Werner came in. Louis Werner was a Lufthansa cargo supervisor. 46 years old, married, working-class guy from Queens. Not a criminal, not connected to the mob, just a regular guy who worked at the airport and went home to his family every night. But Werner had a problem: gambling. He couldn't stop. Horses, sports, cards, anything he could bet on he did, and he was terrible at it. By 1978, Werner was drowning in gambling debts. We're talking about $50,000, equivalent to over $200,000 today. He'd borrowed from everyone, maxed out credit cards, taken loans from friends, and now he was borrowing from people who didn't accept excuses when you couldn't pay. Werner was desperate. His marriage was falling apart. He was about to lose his house. He was facing financial ruin. Through connections at the airport, Werner was introduced to someone who said they could help with his debt problem. That someone was connected to Jimmy Burke. The proposal was straightforward. Give us information about the Lufthansa cash shipments. Tell us when the biggest shipment is coming through. Tell us about security, procedures, schedules. Do that, and we'll clear your debt plus give you a cut of the take. Werner knew it was wrong, knew it was dangerous, knew he was getting involved with people who could kill him. But desperation makes people do stupid things. He agreed. And over the following weeks, Werner gave Burke everything. The schedule for the biggest cash shipment of the year, arriving December 11th. The vault location in Building 261. The number of guards on overnight duty. The fact that workers sometimes propped doors open because the locks were annoying. Security camera blind spots. Everything Burke needed to plan the perfect robbery. Now Burke just needed the crew. Burke recruited carefully, people he'd worked with before, people he could trust, people who understood that talking meant dying. Tommy DeSimone would be the enforcer. Tommy was a made man in the Lucchese family, a stone-cold killer with a hair-trigger temper. He'd murdered at least 2 people that Burke knew about, probably more. Tommy would handle intimidation and make sure no one played hero. Angelo Seep would help with logistics and muscle. Angelo was tough, reliable, and knew how to handle himself. Joe Buddha Manry would drive. He was an expert getaway driver who'd worked with Burke on previous hijackings. Parnell Stacks Edwards would be responsible for ditching the van after the heist and providing a secondary vehicle. Stacks wasn't the brightest guy, but he was loyal and followed orders. And then there was Henry Hill. Henry Hill was Burke's protege. Half Irish, half Sicilian, Henry had been working for Paul Vario since he was a teenager. He wasn't directly involved in the robbery itself, but he was part of the planning and would help move the money afterward. Henry was connected, trusted, and smart. Or so everyone thought. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. They'd hit the cargo terminal in the early morning hours when staffing was minimal, disable the few workers on duty, open the vault using Werner's information, load the money into a van, drive away. The whole operation should take less than 90 minutes. Burke stressed one critical rule to everyone: no bodies, no violence unless absolutely necessary, no killing, in and out clean. The moment someone dies, it becomes a federal murder investigation and the FBI gets involved. Just robbery, that's a local police matter with much less heat. Everyone agreed. December 11th, 1978, 2:45 in the morning. A black Ford van pulls up to the Lufthansa cargo terminal at JFK. 6 men wearing ski masks and gloves exit the vehicle. They're carrying guns, pistols, and 1 shotgun, but Burke's orders are clear: intimidate, don't kill. They enter through a side door that, just as Werner said, isn't properly secured. The few workers inside are caught completely off guard. The robbers round up the employees, about half a dozen people, and force them into a break room. They're calm but firm. Nobody moves, nobody gets hurt. We just want the money. Tommy DeSimone and Angelo Seep head to the vault while others guard the workers. Thanks to Werner's information, they know exactly where to go. They force a supervisor to open the vault. Inside, just as Werner promised, are wooden pallets stacked with shrink-wrapped bundles of U.S. currency. More money than most of these guys had ever seen in one place. They start loading, bundle after bundle, 40 boxes of cash, each containing about $150,000. Plus, there's jewelry valuable, but the cash is the real prize. The operation is smooth, professional, no one's panicking. The workers are terrified but compliant. Everything is going exactly according to plan. By 4 in the morning, the van is loaded. Over $5 million in cash, plus jewelry valued at another $1 million. Adjusted for inflation, this is nearly $30 million in today's money. They leave the workers locked in the break room, get in the van, and drive away into the early morning darkness. The perfect heist: no violence, no bodies, no traces. Except it wasn't perfect, not even close. The first mistake happened almost immediately. Parnell Stacks Edwards was supposed to take the van to a scrapyard in New Jersey where it would be crushed and destroyed within hours of the robbery. Instead, Stacks went to his girlfriend's apartment, got high, and fell asleep. The van sat on a Brooklyn street for days. When police finally found it, they recovered fingerprints. Lots of fingerprints. But that wasn't the biggest problem. The biggest problem was that everyone involved started acting stupid. Mafia protocol after a big score is simple. Lay low, don't spend. Don't flash cash. Don't buy expensive things. Wait months, even years if necessary, before you start enjoying the money. Patience keeps you alive and out of prison. Burke told everyone this explicitly. Do not spend $1. Do not change your lifestyle. Act like nothing happened. Nobody listened. Tommy DeSimone bought a Cadillac, brand new, paid cash. A guy who'd been broke 6 months earlier suddenly has $30,000 for a luxury car. Angelo Seep started buying jewelry for his wife, expensive clothes, throwing money around at restaurants. Other crew members were worse. They bought fur coats, expensive watches, new furniture. Some were literally walking into stores with bags of cash. The FBI noticed, local police noticed, everyone noticed. And Burke noticed that people noticed. That's when the killing started. Burke had a simple philosophy: dead men don't talk. And if the crew was attracting attention by spending the money, they were a liability. Better to eliminate the liability and keep the money for himself. Parnell Stacks, Edwards was first. 2 weeks after the heist, Tommy DeSimone walked into Stacks' apartment and shot him 6 times in the head. Punishment for not ditching the van and for leaving fingerprints all over it. Then Martin Krugman, a wig shop owner who'd helped connect Werner to Burke and was demanding his cut of the money. He disappeared. His body was never found. Louis Werner, the insider who'd made it all possible, was arrested within months. The FBI had figured out he was involved through his financial records and airport access. Werner went to trial and was convicted. He served 5 years in prison. But Werner didn't cooperate with authorities. He kept his mouth shut, and that probably saved his life. Others weren't so lucky or so smart. Tommy DeSimone disappeared in January 1979. The official word was he'd been inducted as a full member of the Gambino family. He went to what he thought was his induction ceremony and was never seen again. The truth: the Gambino family killed him as revenge for murders he'd committed years earlier. Burke may have even set him up, eliminating another person who knew too much about Lufthansa. Joe Buda, Manry, and his girlfriend were found shot to death in a stolen car, both shot in the back of the head. Teresa Ferrara, a girlfriend of one of the crew members who knew too much, was dismembered. Her body parts were found scattered across New York. Paolo Licastri, a Colombo family associate who'd helped fence some of the jewelry, was shot and killed. Louis Cafora, another crew member, and his wife Joanna both disappeared. Their bodies have never been found, but everyone knows Burke had them killed. The list goes on. 11 people connected to the Lufthansa heist died between 1978 and 1980, all murdered, most by Burke or on Burke's orders. Burke was systematically eliminating everyone who could connect him to the robbery. And it almost worked. Despite the bodies, despite the FBI investigation, despite massive pressure from the federal government, no one could definitively prove Burke organized the Lufthansa heist. The people who could testify were dead. The few survivors were too terrified to talk. Burke was arrested multiple times on other charges, but never for Lufthansa specifically. Then came Henry Hill. Henry Hill, Burke's protege, had problems of his own by 1980. He'd gotten into the drug business against Mafia rules. He was arrested on narcotics charges, and he knew what happened to people who became liabilities to Jimmy Burke. Henry saw the writing on the wall. Burke had killed his friends. Burke would kill him too if given the chance. So Henry made a choice. He decided to cooperate with the FBI. In 1980, Henry Hill entered the Witness Protection Program and became a federal informant, and he told them everything. Henry testified about Lufthansa, about other robberies, about murders, about the entire structure of the Lucchese crime family operations in Queens. He gave prosecutors Paul Vario, Jimmy Burke, and dozens of other mobsters. Paul Vario was convicted and died in prison in 1988. Jimmy Burke was convicted of murder and racketeering, though ironically, never specifically for the Lufthansa heist itself. He died in prison in 1996, serving a life sentence. Henry Hill became the most famous mob informant in history. His story was told in the book Guy and became the Martin Scorsese film Goodfellas. Henry lived in witness protection until his death in 2012, though he violated the program multiple times and was eventually kicked out. The Lufthansa heist money, most of it was never recovered. Burke likely buried millions in various locations. Some think he hid it in properties he owned. Others believe he laundered it through legitimate businesses over the years. To this day, approximately $5 million from the Lufthansa robbery remains missing, somewhere in New York, or New Jersey, or maybe scattered across multiple locations. There's a fortune in 1970s cash that no one has ever found. The Lufthansa heist was supposed to be the perfect crime, the score that would set everyone up for life. Instead, it became a case study in how greed, stupidity, and paranoia destroy everything. If the crew had followed Burke's instructions and laid low, they probably would have gotten away with it. But they couldn't help themselves. They had to spend, had to show off, had to flash their newfound wealth. And Burke couldn't control his paranoia. Instead of managing his crew and protecting his investment, he murdered his way through everyone connected to the heist, creating a trail of bodies that attracted even more law enforcement attention. The Lufthansa robbery changed everything. It showed the FBI that traditional mafia rules were breaking down, made men like Tommy DeSimone were dealing drugs and attracting attention. Associates like Henry Hill were willing to flip and testify. The old code of omerta, the code of silence, was crumbling. Within a decade of Lufthansa, the FBI would use RICO statutes and a wave of informants to systematically dismantle the five families. The mafia that had dominated American organized crime for 60 years would be shattered. And it all started with 6 men, a cargo terminal, and $6 million that turned into a death sentence for almost everyone who touched it. The perfect heist that destroyed everyone involved. The biggest cash robbery in American history that no one really got to enjoy. The score that proved sometimes in the criminal world, success is more dangerous than failure. Pause. The Lufthansa heist remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in FBI history. Technically unsolved, because no one was ever successfully prosecuted specifically for the robbery itself, even though everyone knows who did it. And somewhere out there, buried in a basement or hidden in the walls of an old building, millions of dollars from that December night in 1978 are still waiting to be found. If you want more stories about the rise and fall of American organized crime, subscribe and let me know which mob story you want to hear next. Until then, remember, in the criminal world, the biggest danger isn't getting caught. It's getting away with it.